Welcome, welcome. It's Friday again. That means it's time for MSP Confidential. And this week, I can't believe it. It's been like a decade since I spoke to this very, very talented and special gentleman. I have Mr. AJ Jetha of Marketcircle, or just known as AJ. AJ, welcome to this live stream. I kind of was I shocked myself that we kind of just went into a friendly conversation. We didn't even get caught up on the last 10 years that we haven't spoken. That's just how
hmm
easygoing the conversations with you tend to be. How have you been?
Good. I've been great. And thanks for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. It was one of those things that kind of hit my radar a few weeks back when I was thinking, Canadian companies is something that I'd like to feature more on the live stream. And
hmm
you've been, are you still in Markham, by the way? Because I remember Marketcircle
Yes,
was in
yes,
Markham.
yes. Still,
Yeah.
still here now. We don't have that office that you last saw, because now we're fully remote. We're 100% remote, so we don't have an office anymore, a physical office. We're kind of like all over the world.
Yeah, I guess that's the destination many companies are going, and cool to make that pivot and interesting to get rid of that cost for
Yeah,
for
there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs. It's not all a bed of roses. So there are definitely trade-offs, some pros and some cons. Um, but it is where we are today.
yeah. So Market Circle, is it 25 years now since the company has been in existence, or was there
That's approximately right. So when I started it, the dates are a little bit fuzzy because I kind of started as an idea, then I incorporated it later, and all
mm,
that kind of stuff. It wasn't one big bang. It was kind of like a gradual progression. So the incorporation papers, I believe, are September.
mm. But wasn't speaking of big bangs, wasn't Market Circle born from a dot-com boom,
That's right.
so to
That's
speak?
right. Yeah, that's right. The original idea was basically a marketplace to buy and sell services and goods, but instead of auctions, using negotiations. A little ahead of our time, I think.
And do you think the Market Circle name was maybe a hangover from that? Do you wish you
Oh,
had changed the
100%. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
wish
yeah,
you
yeah.
had changed the company's name to something else? Now it's probably too far down the path to go back and create that kind of pain.
Well, everybody knows us by the, Daylite guys, and gals. But yeah, I mean it is a name that's kind of stuck around, and it's got a nice ring to it. So who knows? We'll probably talk more about the product going forward, and kind of, downplay the market circle part of it.
Sure. Well, a lot of people are familiar, of course, with Daylight back in the, I want to say mid 2000s, late 2000s. Is I think when you really started in earnest, sort of this idea of a partner program and
hmm
trying to get ACNs or Apple Consultants Network members
Right.
involved. That was
Right.
certainly around the time that I began working with you guys. In fact, I,
That's
I
right.
ran into Amin Romani the other day
Okay.
at a conference. I forget which one, but he's now with Global Mac, who was also at the time a big
Yes.
Daylight
Yes.
partner, and
Yeah.
it just brought back all these memories, of course, of having been around Market Circle and Daylight, and
Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
customers deploy their CRM and the whole thing. But
That's right.
you've always talked quite openly about being bootstrapped,
Right.
and it's interesting, I think, in the IT community how
hmm
much MSPs, managed service providers, struggle at one point or another about whether to take an investment in the company, give up
Yeah.
ownership and control. And I just wanted maybe a bit of your thoughts on the commitment to staying bootstrapped, perhaps after all these years.
Yeah, so we've never taken any money from investors or anything like that, other than that initial thing for the .com. Which the interesting story was is that since it didn't work out, I had to figure out a way how to repay them, which is what led to consulting, and then after consulting, we started Daylight, and then that's how we. But other than that, it's been straight bootstrapped. Since then, uh, straight cash, like no debt or anything like that. And so it's not an easy road. It's definitely not an easy road. Uh, but it is a more forgiving road than it than if, you had taken money from somebody, right? So there's the trade-off. The trade-off is that it's harder at the beginning, um, and you got to be very disciplined about how you spend your money. And then on the other side, the trade-off is that, if you screw up, you got a little bit of time. Nobody's
Mm.
gonna, come and decapitate you. So there is that trade-off, and sometimes I wonder about, either one of those. We should have taken some money. At the time, actually, I was looking for money a long time ago, and nobody would give it to me. So I'd be like, okay, well, fine. I'm gonna just make it work anyways. And so here we are.
Well, maybe let me ask you a question from the consumer side of things. Do you feel
Mhm.
that the companies that you've done business with who are maybe beholden to PE, to private investment,
Right.
that their dynamics, their purpose, their ability to execute has shifted maybe away from the thing that attracted you to them in the first place, and consequentially, do you feel that's one of the reasons you wanted to stay bootstrapped is perhaps the fear of letting the money drive the direction of Marketcircle to a place that you weren't comfortable with it going?
So I see both, right? I've seen situations where um, the owner or the founder has a strong enough personality that they can still drive that their initial vision through even after an acquisition or after a big investment. But then I've seen the other side where they get completely overwhelmed, not overwhelmed, but smothered is a better word, with the strong personalities that come with a lot of money, right? I mean, if you think about it, that money doesn't come from people that don't have strong opinions,
It
right?
doesn't come
And
with a
so
carte blanche. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting, and I've seen both. And some owners that I know, like not necessarily in the IT business, but in other businesses too, um, they hate it after. Like they were like, I couldn't get out of there fast enough because they were just completely neutering the brand. They had ulterior motives, really. It was more about the customers rather than the product, or about the
Mm.
service, etc. And then on the flip side, I have, two or three that have turned out really well, that they're very happy with. I think those were all acquisitions.
Hmm.
And they've stayed on and they get a lot of, they do other things, etc. So some of them have worked out, but the majority of them that I know, uh, they regret.
Yeah. From your perspective, do you think you sacrificed a little velocity, perhaps not taking on money? Um, because I suppose that's one of the things that one of the reasons SaaS companies these days, anyways, take on money is just to move a little bit faster, get to some of
Hmm.
their goals, in a shorter time horizon. But curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, so there is that's one of the trade-offs you make, right? When you stay bootstrapped, it's like you're not going to go at high velocity because you can't. You have to, as our CFO or fractional CFO says, you're building it one brick at a time, and you're not putting up a whole wall in one shot because you have to build it one brick at a time. That's what the resources you have. And so that's what we've had to do, and that's what we've done, right? We've done it one brick at a time.
So on the flip side of trade-offs, is there something that you thank yourself on a regular basis for having stayed that some component or feature of being bootstrapped that you thank yourself on a regular basis for having stayed bootstrapped?
Yeah, so the plus is definitely the you know I determine my own destiny, right? Like it's not I'm not beholden to anybody. If I make a mistake, my head's not on the chopping block because we all make mistakes, some bigger than others, and so so those are that's when you feel the plus side of it, right? I want to take family on vacation 3 weeks. Well, I'm taking it, right? And that's what I've done a lot of times, like 3, 4 weeks. So, I just go on vacation with the family, and that's what we build this kinds of business for. And so
Mm.
you're able to do those kinds of things. You don't have deadlines that are imposed on you by other people, etc. So, so that freedom um, uh, is important to me, and that's one of the things I've gotten, right? But there is somebody that says, uh, with discipline comes freedom. So you need to be disciplined.
Yeah. I guess yeah, people think maybe those two things are opposing to some extent.
Right.
But maybe it's just that they're linear,
They aren't
not
opposing.
necessarily opposing.
Yeah, yeah, no, they're definitely not opposing. The one facilitates the other. Discipline facilitates freedom.
Mm. Well, for those joining us, and there's a few people connecting live. If you are familiar with AJ and Marketcircle and Daylite, of course, and you have any questions throughout, drop them into the comments. We'll throw them up on the screen. Maybe it'll send us in an
Yeah.
interesting, unexpected direction. For those
Yes.
that haven't met AJ, AJ is the CEO of Marketcircle, who builds a great product primarily for the Mac called Daylite. Daylite has been a leading CRM platform in the Mac ecosystem for years. One that I use, one that I helped my clients deploy when I was doing IT consulting and so on. And I kind of wanted to maybe take you back to some of the early years of when the thing started to come into view, like when it goes from
Hmm.
blurry to less blurry. Because I think when we transitioned through phases, like you mentioned, you had the dot-com thing, you went into consulting to pay back the bill, and then this thing or idea surges, and then you kind of start working at it. When would you say was really the turning point of the company becoming the company? And was there some critical milestone there that happened?
Well, we like to say we've gone through four pivots, four major pivots, right? So we had the original .com one, then we had the consulting one, then we had on-premise license-based kind of software, which is when we met. And then we are now, a SaaS business, right? So a SaaS business is very different than the previous type of business where, it's license based and on-prem. And so they're very, very different actually. The more that we're in the SaaS space, and then the SaaS space is also evolving and changing. But these are the major four pivots that we've gone through, and uh, there are definitely pros and cons to each one, right? Definitely pros and cons. What were you thinking of when you asked that question in terms of like this? You have a smile on your face, so you're thinking of something.
No, I was just kind of reminiscing that I have these maybe choice memories, I guess is the best way I can describe it, and they
Okay,
kind of tend
okay.
to revolve, around certain my own kind of milestones in my consulting career, in a very
Hmm.
similar way to how music kind of defines or marks certain pivots in one's life, I suppose. But I,
Yeah.
for example, remember some of the early partner gatherings. When you guys were sort of in the very early stages of even defining what a partner program,
Hmm.
meant or could look like or what the
Right.
whole point of it was. And I think it was kind of interesting going through a bit of that co-discovery of what that means. Because even for
Right.
us as partners, I think we didn't necessarily know how to go to market. I think the early days of the partner program was really just about reselling licenses more than anything else.
It was. It was.
And that, of
It was,
course,
and a lot of break fix mentality came into that as opposed to the consulting kind of mentality, right? That was the what people were struggling with their businesses evolving from break fix to more like what it is now. And
yeah.
so we were part of we were in that mix as well. And I remember struggling with a lot of people's not struggling, but this was a constant conversation, which was, like um, consulting versus fixing, right? And then we were talking more about, if you recall, one of the things that was always a topic at all the conferences that we would have is how do I be a more consultative partner to my customers, so your customers, right? Such that they trust me, and B, I'm always able to help them, grow their business. That was the thing that joined us, is that our objective is to help these small businesses get better and grow and be more successful. And then the partners, uh, whether they're MSPs or other kind of partners, is to kind of help with that because companies like us, we have thousands of customers. We can't deal with customers on a one-on-one basis. And then on the flip side with MSPs and so forth, you're a bit closer to the customer and you're able to understand their nuances and needs and connect between that and a product like ours or others, right?
Yeah.
And so that um, point or junction or whatever it was always a bit of a challenge. I think it's more clear these days because of all the cloud providers and there isn't so much, hey, I gotta replace the hard drive and hey, the CD drive busted now and oh this hardware failure or whatever. So those problems are much less now. Not that they don't exist anymore, but they're much less.
Yeah, and that, when we were preparing for this conversation, one of the things we talked about a little bit was a bit of this partner ecosystem, and I guess for lack of a better word, you hesitated for a moment because I guess we tend to want to put a little bit of the rosy, everything is great veil on things, but I think the industry overall is kind of going through this transition of the dwindling margins on the resale of products, and overall
Hmm.
I think IT providers are having to become way more consultative, even for things like Microsoft 365. In fact, so much so that I'm seeing some IT providers pivoting away from the whole MSP model of doing all the IT to getting very niche and focusing specifically on consulting for Microsoft 365 as an example.
Right, right.
A bonus of any of these consulting engagements is maybe having those few points here and there of the resale of licenses, but by and large they are no longer the motivation is reselling licensing. I feel like, and so in that way I feel like certainly the partner program maybe no longer needs to be focused on, well, hey, make money on selling these licenses, because that's not where it's going to come from. But you see
Yeah,
guys
100%.
like Alf Rupert in Germany and iOS expert, like it's always been mesmerizing how much of an ecosystem he built around consulting, even apps and services that he built on his own that
Hmm.
tie
Hmm.
into Daylite.
Right.
Maybe speak to that a little bit, because it feels like he went so deep that you guys kind of almost strategically partnered with him to some extent, to continue a bit of that effort.
Right. So here's the thing we have to kind of remember and about the small businesses that we cater to, right? And when I say small businesses, up to a couple hundred employees or like that, um, is that the world is way more complex than it used to be,
Hmm.
right? And a business owner like myself, we we don't know the answers. And we just know we gotta kind of have this outcome. But how do we get to this outcome? Like how does that happen? And so this is where you need somebody you can trust and somebody that has domain expertise in that particular area so that we can go say, hey, this is our situation. This is what we'd like to accomplish. How do we get there? Right? Um, and for that person to kind of bring up even situations that you may not even consider that could be potential pitfalls for the business, right? So
Hmm.
now if you think about that and you talk about, for example, 365, right? It's a deep product. There's like so much around it. There's Teams, there's this, there's that. Like how do you keep up with all of that and then keep up with other products and then keep up with other products? And me as a consumer, a business owner, I'm saying, okay, I need Word, I need Excel. Um, Now what? Right? How do I actually be productive with this? Or how do I make my business better? And so you, as an MSP, would come in, well, I would hope, to be able to kind of guide us a little bit in terms of how to get there and the pitfalls to avoid, right? So now if you think about it, every single product, even like if you think of QuickBooks, right? Um, there's so much to them that no one person can kind of be an expert on that, on that, on that, on that. So I think the world is very different than it used to be.
There's an interesting dynamic, I think, in the size of the small business. You talked about small businesses up to 200 users as an example, but I think in the spectrum of user count of the small business, the
Hmm.
amount of benefit of the doubt that you get as an IT provider in getting involved in that trusted advisor role, providing recommendations on various domains of expertise, changes very drastically as that company gets larger. And I'll give you an example. One of my
Okay.
customers that I had for years that started out as a 15-person business, there was a time when I knew every single thing that they were going through from a business perspective, because that's
Hmm.
about the size of business where you're sharing all the issues.
Right.
As soon as, and they continued growing to about a 150-person business. And at 150 people, there were absolutely dynamics that were very foreign to me as a 7-person business that I couldn't even, come to the table to discuss. But
Right.
we still see them in other companies that size potentially. But the interesting result that I saw is that this customer would not give us the time of day to provide any kind of input on issues they were having at that size, because they didn't believe us to have any information or expertise or knowledge about what a 150-person company goes through. And it's just an
Right.
interesting dynamic that plays out in many, many parts of business where, like, most company CEOs want to talk to other company CEOs that are about their size or a little bit larger, because
Right.
they
Yes.
just don't understand that how anybody smaller has gone through any of the issues that they're experiencing, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I find that interesting, sort of in the consulting business, the capability to continue to provide a service that the customer believes you to have the expertise in can be tricky. Now, strictly consulting, if you've worked with many companies that size, that becomes your calling card, of course. But
Yeah. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
growth period, it's super difficult, no doubt.
Yeah, it's it is growing a business is not easy. Like I forget where Mike, our COO, he would always remind me about this, is that, businesses hit plateaus, that at 5 user, you kind of, or 5 people, you kind of hit a plateau. And then you got to kind of get through that. And then the next plateau is kind of like 10, right? Where the dynamics change. And the next one is like 15 or 20 or whatever. And then after
Mm,
that, it's like 50. And then after 50, it's like 100, right? And then because each time now you have these are major milestones in the evolution of that business, right? There's more people to manage, there's more security issues, more security exposure maybe. There is different personalities that are involved that how do you deal with these personalities? And some people are saying one thing, they're doing another thing. How do you deal with that? Um, talk about company culture and values and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, uh, you know, I don't remember signing up for any of this, right? But that's the evolutions, and as the business grows like that, you go through these steps, and that's when you rely on somebody that hopefully you found that this kind of person that is like a little bit bigger than you, or has recently gone through what you're going through, so that they can give you some guidance or context or color on the situation, right? Like, I mean,
mm.
have you heard of EO, like Entrepreneurs Organization?
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
our founder is very involved with EO, and I've known about it for years now. I've never been a part of
Yeah.
it myself, but quite familiar.
Yeah, so I'm part of EO, and then prior to that, I was part of another group called CEO Global, right? And these are, as business owners, I highly recommend these kinds of organizations because, again, of, people in similar situations can kind of help each other out. So I'll give you a couple of things. So CEO Global, part of my group, it's a bigger organization, and then they have smaller groups of 8 to 12 kind of thing, right? And they kind of pair people so that they're not in the same industry, so there's no conflict of interest or anything like that. And so part of my group, I had the CEO of Rico Canada in my group, right? And so his is a $500 million business, or more, maybe. I don't remember the number. And I'm like, so, I'm like, super small compared to that. And so the problems that he would have are were very different than my problem. So, we couldn't help each other out, right? Versus in EO, they do try and pair the size of the company, still in the different industries, but the size in terms of revenue, they try to put those people together. And in that situation, uh, there's a lot more cross-pollination of help
Mm,
and ideas and how to get through certain things because somebody has experienced recently something similar that you're going through, right? And so
yeah.
that cohort of people can really help you out. Like I highly recommend that as, and then getting into what they call forum. So in our case, it's 8 people, but it could be anywhere from 6 to 12. And where the businesses are a little similar or a little bit bigger than where you're at.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of that growth is, and certainly operationally, a lot of those things are way more similar in a similar revenue range, and we see this in the
Yeah.
MSP industry as well. There's a lot of peer group organizations where MSPs work together, and a little bit of a range is acceptable. But you start to see the discrepancies when that range is too big, and some of
Hmm.
the larger companies just can't get any useful feedback from the smaller ones because they're just not even doing some of the same things.
That's right.
So
That's right.
so it is interesting, and I remember attending a few of the workshops that SaaStr does on Wednesdays, and the founder, I was just looking it up because I think I was forgetting his name, Jason Lemkin. Jason Lemkin.
Yeah. Yeah.
In one of his podcast episodes, he talks a lot about this. He says, in the process of building the community around SaaStr, he realized there was only two ways to bring people together. It was either revenue range or role within the company, and that's it. Pretty much, if you tried
Mhm.
to like pair people up any other way, like it just would fall apart at some point. And so I thought that was
Right.
always interesting. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I can relate to that.
Now, one of the things that I think was appealing to me early in the Marketcircle days too, and I feel like I've always had an eye or a taste for design,
Hmm.
is the design of products. Especially we're beholden to shiny object syndrome in this industry, I
Right.
think as a whole. But and so we see something that looks great and just has a different proposal in terms of the experience that you're getting as an end user. We want
Yeah.
to have a look. I think that's definitely interesting. And I think
Right.
early on in your Market Circle career, you've been recipient or placed highly in the Apple Design Awards, which are highly coveted.
Yes.
And so, talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe just even the design principles that the company had, and I don't. I suppose you never strive for the award as the end result, but it's kind of great when it comes up.
Yes, some people do, and one of the things that in the Apple kind of ecosystem is that, design is valued, right? And um, but we have to remind ourselves what Steve Jobs would always say, design is not how it looks, but how it works. And this is something sometimes we forget, and we put some really nice colors and some really nice boxes, etc. But design is really how it works. And so um, it's a fine balance between making something functional that solves problems that's efficient and something that is, really nice to look at, right? We try to be in the middle there where, it's not ugly and it's not like, what I call field vomit, fields everywhere kind of thing. And then, so pretty that it's not functional, right?
Hmm.
Because we've seen both of those, right? And people don't like, like the one that's pretty. Yes, it's great. I'm looking at it today. 5 days from now, I'm like, well, it doesn't solve my problem. So versus the other one, it's like, oh, I hate it, but it puts money in the bank. So we try to, we deliberately try to, kind of be in the middle, where we're not too shiny, and then we're not too functional, and you know what I mean? Like we try and
Yeah.
try and do that. And that's how we got these awards actually, because we weren't necessarily the prettiest looking app, but we did kind of strike the balance between functionality and decent aesthetics.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a little pedigree now building around the people that have come through Marketcircle over the years. We were backstage before going live talking about one person I remember, Ryan Cash. And in this industry of IT providers, where a lot of people are gamers, a lot of people actually know his products. He created his company is called Snowman, or built by Snowman. He created some of those skateboarding or skiing apps,
Yeah,
endless skiing
Alto's
apps,
Adventure and
Alto's Adventure, yeah.
yeah.
But I remember him being involved in the early days. I want to say like around the 2008 2012 period,
Yeah,
with
somewhere around there. Yeah, he was helping us on the sales and marketing side, and he always had a really good um, sense for that. And then when he went on his own and he founded this company and he's doing great. I spoke to him, I think last year or so.
oh,
I
that's
think I
great.
spoke to him.
I'm
Yeah,
glad you guys
so
got in
so
touch.
we keep in touch here and there. We kind of meet up at some events. Great guy, and yeah, he's done well, and that's amazing. So we have people like him. We have people who have gone on to work at Facebook, then at Apple, then at OpenAI. We've gone on people to at Apple, then at Instagram, and like all over. We have an alumni of people that are doing some really interesting things.
That's great. You can say they cut their teeth at Marketcircle. That's where they learned how
Yeah,
to
they did.
do
They did.
good work.
They did. Yeah, they did.
That's
And
awesome. I think there's, I have this CD. I was unpacking some things the other day, and this is
mhm.
one of the products
That's how
that
you
you
remembered
guys.
me. That's how he said, "Oh, I should talk to that."
That's actually how it happened. We were collapsing a storage locker that we were paying a bunch of money for, and it was time to just get rid
Right.
of it. And
Right.
when this came up, I ended up just keeping all sorts of stuff, anyways. But this is one that made me think about you a lot. And specifically as it relates to this conversation, it got me thinking about the process or the pivot of going from being a one product company to being a two
Right.
product company at that time. Because I think
Yeah.
that is not as nuanced as most people think. There's a whole other set of maybe operational challenges that come with launching a second
Mhm.
product. And maybe I'm just curious to get some of your fond and maybe not so fond memories of launching a second product.
So the when people ask me what does it take or whatever, I kind of tell people like, starting a product or a business, right, is like the Saturn V rocket on the launch pad, right? Or the space shuttle or whatever, right? It expends most of its energy at the beginning to get to orbit, right? So that's like a company. There's a lot of effort at the beginning to get over all the various,
The
roadblocks
humps.
that
Yeah.
that that come to in your way. And then it's the same for a product, right? Which is why you don't see too many companies with too many products, right? Because it just takes a lot of energy. Um, and it's hard to then um, um, especially in the SaaS world, it's hard to then have these completely different ecosystems or whatever. Like there's a lot of effort that goes into running things just day to day, and then you have these different products and these always competing interests, etc. So it's a delicate balance. And if you look at Apple, who's really successful with their set of products, they don't have a huge number of products, and think of how many people and how many resources they have, right? So each product is like launching a rocket, right? It takes a lot of energy at the beginning, and even ongoing, of course, right? You gotta keep the fuel in there so that the thing can keep flying, right? So that's both rewarding because when you get to orbit, it's like, ooh, imagine that, like I actually
Mm.
worked. And then on the flip side, it's a lot of work. But here's the thing. Um, you know how they say do what you love or whatever, which when I talk to my kids, I kind of try not to say that because like how do you know what you love? Like but when it comes to building stuff, like somebody like me, I enjoy the process of building, right? And so for me, it's not that bad, but other people, it can be really difficult because it's so much energy, right?
Hmm.
I get excited by these, stupid things that are in the background nobody ever sees, and I go like, whoa, I got that to work, um, and so if you're doing that, then it doesn't seem so bad, right? But if you're hating it in the process, it's really difficult.
I think this is interesting that you call that out. Things that in the background that nobody cares about. I
Yeah.
think I think that's an underrated statement. I think a lot more people than you think care about those things. You know, the quality of life type of functionality in certain tools.
Hmm.
You know, I started building my own product in 2013, which is how I ended up at IT Glue. And I think the early stages that I had a bit of the user hat on in the build process. And
Right.
it was really tough battling the concept of minimum viable product through this because it's like, no, how am I going to
Yes.
sacrifice that functionality that I know that's what people want because I want it to just build something that's half baked effectively just to get it out the
Right.
door. And so I constantly struggle with this idea of the MVP of a product because I think it takes a lot of shortcuts. Now, there are companies that are very good at launching early and just iterating, of course, and continuing to build just so they can get into that feedback loop with customers and so
Hmm.
on. But then
Yes.
you
Yes.
see a
Yes.
little bit of the dark side of that, which is you launch the thing and then you can just kind of leave it and move on to other things, and then maybe you come back. But meanwhile, you have this, very early launched half baked product out there in the market, and I think that's tough from both sides, both the maker and the consumer. But I'm curious, where have been some of the places where you've put your foot down and said, this is not coming out unless we add this, little rounded corner here.
So going back to that point that you mentioned about the half-baked product. Remember we talked about discipline equals freedom or whatever that statement is.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna release early, which sometimes you have to, you don't have a choice, right? Um, you have to be disciplined about continuing on rather than shifting focus, which is a mistake that we've made a few times, right? We got this out, we're exhausted, we're taking a few days break or whatever it is, and then it's the next thing. Meanwhile,
Another
what should have
another
actually
squirrel, yeah.
been the case? Yeah, it should have been like, you got to continue. Go take a break, that's fine, right? But now you got to continue. And so in the SaaS world, that's easier to do than it was back in those days where you had to actually burn a CD, or you had to have a big splash in order to get any kind of attention. Now with the SaaS world, you can kind of iterate, like we have releases every week, and customers sometimes get pissed off, like, well, too many downloads, right? But um, um, we can do that in the SaaS space, but you couldn't do that before. And so before it was a lot more, but so you have to be disciplined, like to go back to your point about like half-baked products, it's like you just got to continue,
Yeah, fair
right? So you
enough.
can make it work as long as that discipline is there.
Yeah, I think Billings was an interesting product at the time, and a question maybe a little tangential to all that is this
Hmm.
idea of shared code base or shared functionality. Because as a very different product, one was the CRM and stuff, and then the other one was the billing. But I remember Report Writer was kind of this one thing that kind of linked the two intrinsically because the reporting engine that Daylite had was basically the same reporting engine that made its way into Billings. And
Right.
similarly, over the last 5, 10 years, Microsoft, for example, merging its code bases for the Windows version of Office and the Mac version of Office and trying to bring these
Hmm.
two things together. And so I just wanted to maybe, I don't know what the question that is there is, but, the complexities of code bases, departing from the thing that everybody on the team knows to be the code base of one product into another, but then keeping similarities like the report writer thing. I don't know
Right.
your hindsight on it.
So this is actually a really important topic because for businesses like mine, right? Because you can have too much, uh, too many differences, then you can't maintain certain things. So, um, and then at the same time, if you have too much of the same, then it that's where you kind of want to go. So the way we did it with billings is we and Daylite is we had these frameworks, and then the product was a combination of frameworks plus some uniqueness to that product on top of these. So the report writer, for example, you were talking about, right? It was the same one for both. Um, and then for Daylite, it was a little bit different. There was some veneer on top, and then so that worked out well. But that's difficult to pull off. It's difficult to pull off, but it is a important skill. So even now in the cloud stuff that we talk about, right? That you're running all these services. There are two very different mindsets. One mindset is the microservices mindset, and the other one is the monolith mindset, right? And so going back to your point of sharing code base, right? So the microservices, when the pure microservice mindset, it's like every service is unique to that one thing, and it uses the language and frameworks
Hmm.
that is best suited for that job, right? Versus in the monolith, it's the same language and the same frameworks, and you kind of make it work for your situation. And so there's these opposing kind of views, which is going back to that same point that you're talking about, right? And if in terms of the microservices now, you'll see in our space that there's now a reversion back to monoliths because it was just too difficult to maintain all these things. Right? There's security updates for every single one. You have to put on a different mindset to deal with this programming language and that framework and that programming language and that framework. And then the monolith part of it is that, it's all in the same language. So you can, um, you don't have to do these heavy mental context switches between different types. So going back to the report writer, it's the same thing as the kind of quote unquote monolith idea where you have one code base that is leveraged many places, and therefore you can continue putting your brain cells there, versus the other one where you have these small things, but then you need to be like what they call a polyglot or something like that. I forget the term.
Yeah.
And most people can't do that, right? So you want to try and keep
Polymath.
it. It is difficult
Polymath
to
is
do,
the
but
term,
you
I
want to
think.
do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Polymath is the term, if I recall.
Is it polymath?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think the reversion back to monolith is maybe interesting on one more context, which is the context of cost. You and I talked about this a little bit in preparation, but
Yeah.
it's not just from our conversation, but I've been seeing various conversations or X tweets and threads about this, of people be like, costs are out of control. We're moving back to
Hmm.
bare metal environments, and so I guess let's maybe rewind to making the pivot to
Okay.
being a SaaS company, getting away from on-prem licensing and that whole thing. And because I think it starts innocently enough. It's like, oh, we'll build in AWS, we'll build in Azure. It doesn't really matter these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then kind of, as a bootstrap company, maybe you're paying more attention to costs than the average company that gets, an infusion of PE money. And we see this as IT
Right.
providers. There are small businesses that pop up that get an investment from PE, and they're spending money like sailors on the weekend off.
Hmm.
So, but anyways,
Hmm.
so maybe let's rewind to that pivot to SaaS, and we'll evolve into the cost conversation a bit.
Yeah. So the pivot to SaaS was necessary because nobody wants to take 5 hours to install software and try it out, right? Well, I'm exaggerating, but um, and then operating such things is not easy either, right? So you want to kind of get rid of that because, especially because the competitors are doing that. So you want to get rid of that, right? But then when you're talking about the actual operations of um, these cloud infrastructure, right? Where whether it's AWS or Azure or um, uh, Google Compute or whatever it is, yeah, these costs constantly are going up, and they're going up little by little. They're not going up in big chunks. So, so you have two things. You have more usage, which costs you more, and then you have an increasing cost cents, a cent at a time sometimes, or a few cents at a time, or a few dollars at a time, which you're like, ah, that's whatever, it's fine, right? But then later on, you're like, oh my God, like this is my cloud bill right now. And it's like, ooh, that is a lot. I could actually buy 5 times the hardware I need and but then I have to manage it myself. So I need, somebody on staff to be able to manage it. Because when we did run our own equipment in a co-location place, there were like drive failures left, right, and center, right? Not, I'm exaggerating again, but then you have to deal with those because you have to make sure you have spare drives, and then they have to be the same type because they're an array or whatever it may be, right? And so you want to kind of like, but in cloud, you say, okay, I don't have to worry about that, but somebody else is worrying about that, and their costs are going up, so they're passing the cost to you, right? Um, so these costs are going up, and we're seeing more and more of this trend, like you mentioned, where people are kind of like going back to more. Um,
Yeah,
uh, you
self-managed,
know,
self-deployed bare metal.
yeah, like one of the one of the more popular ones recently for the people that are trying to, manage their costs is, for example, Hertzner in I think that's how you say it in Germany or whatever, where they give you a VPS and it's like really reasonably priced, and people are just moving to that kind of thing. Like we do this, we use DigitalOcean, for example. But I was comparing costs just the other day, and the exact same, well, pretty close,
Yeah,
dedicated
the stack.
CPU,
Yeah.
the dedicated, machine, so to speak, was 3 times the cost at DigitalOcean, which is well known to be cheaper than both AWS and Azure and as well as Google Compute. Um, and that is 3 times more expensive than Hertzner. But now, my all my stuff is here. That kind of switch is difficult. So you see the like how why is it 3 times more? But these are adding up. I don't know, like in your space, you got to be seeing this a lot.
We do, and I think there's been many starts around this idea of moving to cloud, and this really strong desire from the industry and the vendors, of course, of moving all your servers to the cloud. And so even if you have file server doing something, the idea was you can
Yeah.
just move that entire workload to the cloud. Um, but I can't remember a single instance where some of those IT providers came back and said, that was great to customers saving so much money. In most cases, it was always more expensive. And even though it unlocks some capabilities and some productivity possibilities that weren't possible when they were on-prem, especially distributed workforces and some other
Hmm.
challenges like that, maybe warrant the additional cost.
Right.
I think in
But
most
do you
cases,
count, sorry, do you count labor cost in that when you're doing that math?
I think most customers, especially where there's an MSP involved in helping actually do the move to cloud, because none of those things would be included in your typical all-included managed services. They'd be a project fee and so on.
Hmm.
I think even large mature companies might just look at the bottom line of the monthly cost of the service, and they'll take a on-prem server and be like, yeah, we're buying this server and it costs X and we're spending that cost over 5 years, the life of the server. And when we look at what we'd spend for this monthly cost of the thing, plus consulting, plus all the other things, like none of it really adds up to any kind of savings. And of course, again, the complexity situations vary, so you have to consider all the variables there. But I'd say sometimes they include consulting costs in that equation, and sometimes they don't. In fact,
Hmm.
when you guys pivoted to cloud and SaaS, I think one of the interesting things that happened at the time is you were effectively, and this is going to sound negative, but it's not, but at the time you were effectively robbing some of the partners of their consulting time. Because, for example, I used to
Yeah,
spend 2 to 4 hours deploying a Daylite server that is going to host the data
right.
for all the clients
Yeah,
in the office to serve their data
yeah,
from. And now
yeah,
you're based in the cloud. And so now these 4 hours of consulting time disappeared. And so this is an interesting
100%. Yeah,
dynamic, right? That I think
yeah.
vendors end up having to manage and figure out how to talk to.
So what's interesting, it's actually great you bring this up because for us, being a product company, so to speak, like we we kind of had to because all the customers, all our customers be like, I don't want to go through this hassle. I'm just gonna go here, sign up, hit OK, right? And try oh, it works great. Like I'm gonna just stick. So we kind of had to do that in order to survive as a business because had we not, we would not be having this conversation today, right? Um, and so that was a necessity, but to me, it's more about the progress of efficiency and time, where, before to do something, it cost you X, and today it's half X, right? Like in terms of in other ways, right? Not in
Yeah.
like when the way you're the 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 comparison that you're drawing here is actually really interesting because back then it was okay, well, I gotta get the hardware, I gotta get somebody to help me set up the hardware and just set up the software, and then keep it running. And then now you don't have to worry about that, but it may still be just about the same cost, right? So the only thing that you kind of say maybe inflation kind of compensates for that a little bit, and you're still ahead because of that. But I don't know. It's a good question. It's a really good question.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it reminds me of when Apple really started promoting the that the customers could set up and manage the server environment on their own, and
Yeah,
you know,
Xserve.
and I imagine a meme of Apple consultants, in a room in the back somewhere going, just laughing because
Right.
we knew like at some point they were going to hit a brick wall of like knowledge gap and be like, I need a consultant anyways, and then you have to come in and not only set up the thing, but you have to undo all the wrong things
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they
You got to
did.
fix the damage. Yeah.
And so it was a very profitable time to say the least. But I hate having to put that, a veil on it because like we don't want people to suffer through some of these things, but
Mhm.
sometimes you can't help what Apple is going to do, and you never know. You can't come in and insert yourself in the process, be like, hey, this is not a great idea because this is what we're going to see in the market after you suggest that people can set up their own servers, and sure enough,
Right.
that happened. But now all that stuff, of course, has gone away. Pretty much all this on-prem stuff disappeared. Apple removed the whole server dynamic from their ecosystem, and I think that was a good play. And it's just now so much more about sort of integrating to the other ecosystems, Microsoft
Yeah.
identity, and so on. So it's very different. And I imagine
Right.
there's a
Yeah. Yeah. Totally different.
with the complexity also comes the simplicity of some things
Mhm.
because I imagine that despite some consultants being involved in the Daylight customers deployment of things, sometimes they still call Marketcircle, be like, hey, my client is not working, and now you have to troubleshoot an entirely different stack for every customer. Do they have a server? Do they not have a server? Is it running on their
Yeah.
laptop? They thought that could be the server. There's all these interesting complexities maybe disappear by just moving to this simple, cloud plus syncing client dynamic that is what you have today. And for
Yeah.
whatever
It
it's
is. It
worth,
is simpler in that
yeah,
way. It is
yeah.
simpler, and we can deploy fixes server side that we don't have to bother you for, and so in that way, it is way simpler. That's definitely been a plus because let me tell you, people would have messed up hardware in messed up locations, where we would be like, this is a true story, right? So we had this customer. It was about a 10, 15 person company, and they call us up and they said, well, my server got stolen, right?
Oh,
And we're like, what do you mean it got stolen? And it says, yeah, it got stolen. So where did you have it? Oh, I had it, next to on the ledge next to the window in my store. So people could see it from the outside. And you go, wait a minute, that's your whole business is on that machine and you just left it there? He goes, yeah, it was fine for all these years. And then, somebody broke the window and took the server. It's like, oh my, right? So this is a true story. And luckily, because we did the offline sync, we were able to get at least part of their data back. It took a lot of effort, but that's I'm telling you that story because there was like wildly different kind of whacked out scenarios where people would store their data in their server. Like they thought, whatever, so we don't have that problem anymore
Yeah.
because that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare.
Well, and that's hours and hours and hours of, tech support and trying to help this
Yeah.
one customer. And um, you're not even set up for offering professional services probably at the time. So you just kind of, eat the cake and just
Yeah.
hopefully the customer is happy at the end of it. And, or you refer them to a partner and the partner's like, I'm not touching that. So there's always interesting scenarios, no
Well, it
doubt.
was difficult because you have a situation where you have this date, like, if so now they've okay, so they have to buy a new server. That doesn't help me at all. Like the customer is like, can you help me at least recover some of my data, right? Which
Yeah.
we did charge for, but it took away from other things, right? It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Like that I do not miss. Like, you were asking earlier, what are some of the things you miss or don't miss? I do not miss that part. That was a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I kind of meant to ask you the question earlier, and I wrote it down because we kind of kept chatting, and I said I'll bring it back later. But we were talking about mistakes made over time, and I think there's
Mhm.
uh, as I get older, the more I realize that mistakes are kind of on the path to success. They're not the opposite of
Yeah.
success by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination. And I'm curious, as you maybe introspectively look at some of these mistakes made over the past years, which one has been your favorite, or which one has provided the best teachable moment, so to speak?
Oh wow. That's a can of worms. So my attitude towards mistakes is that it's not what happens, it's how you react,
Hmm.
right? So we make mis I make mistakes all the time, man. You know, I'm not shy to share that, I made X number of I made a lot of mistakes. And I think anybody that is successful does make a lot of mistakes, right? So it's just par for the course. I know some people are fearful of that, but it happens. You just kind of want to make sure that you're not, betting too much at one thing because then you lose it all. But really, um, mistakes are just par for the course. Now, in terms of the mistakes that, um, wow, there's so many, I don't even know where to start. Um,
Which I can see in your eyes that there was one in particular that popped into your head. You just, I'm playing like mind reader now. Um,
or
just,
which one are you thinking about?
no, I don't know that I even know, but I feel like I remember some of the painful times around going to the cloud is something that I remember because
Yeah,
I was
it
still a
was
partner around that time, and so
yeah. So I don't know if those would be a mistake, but that would certainly be a combination of mistakes. So, the challenge that we had there was really twofold or threefold, right? So one was um, the technology to actually make it run and scale. That
mm,
was one thing. And then when you go in, when you dive into that rabbit hole, there are a lot of regrets there because certain decisions we made were the wrong decisions. And then the worst ones are the ones that, I knew that was a bad decision, but I still went with it. Those are the worst ones. But so that's in that rabbit hole, right? Then there's the other problem, which is that customers were not necessarily uh, wanting to make the move, right? And so to them, it's if it ain't broke, why fix it, right?
yeah,
But
it
for
was
us, it
early.
was,
It was early for
yeah.
sure. Like in the dynamic of people just doing anything with cloud, I think you guys were very, towards the beginning of that overall.
Well, in retrospect, I think not early enough. So We started on the cloud side of things, learning our lessons the hard way in 2011, right? Where we took Billings because Billings is a smaller product, and we made Billings Pro, and Billings Pro was available in the cloud. But what happened was we had a lot of technical challenges. So we knew that that architecture would not scale to Daylite. And so we had to make new technology, right? Um, and so it's interesting, the technique that we used for scaling back then is now coming back in favor, which was schema-based scaling or schema-based tenancy. But um, so going back, so the customers were, I think we were a little late on that. Secondly, um, I think that um, perhaps being exclusive to the Apple platform may have been a little bit holding us back when we made that transition.
Mm.
We had the idea, but we didn't execute on it, right?
Actually, now that you
Uh,
mentioned that, I remember you guys talking about, I think you even had some test Windows clients at one point, no? Or am I misremembering
no
that?
web stuff.
Oh,
We
web
had
stuff.
some
That's
web
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so then again, building a brick at a time, it was a trade-off. And then we got caught up in just making sure that the technology is super smooth versus putting the money, let's say, into a web client, right? So there's always that trade-off. But that was one of the ones that I would say I wish I had been more aggressive on.
Do you think the ship sailed on that, or do you still think about going to the Windows platform?
The Windows platform, no, web I think is important, and will continue to be so, especially when you think of certain kinds of collaborative things that are happening or patterns that people want to do.
Mm.
So that's not going. But the Windows native, so it's interesting. Windows native app, I don't think is that big of a deal, and the reason for that, this is kind of like maybe sound a little bit not so nice, but um, is that when you use a Windows app and you use a web app, they don't feel too different,
True.
right? And then if you use a Mac app, a real Mac app, and you use a web app, there is a difference, right? And so I think in that sense, there doesn't need to be a Windows native app, but maybe some web functionality, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and so much shifting to mobile, anyways. I think, I presume you're seeing a steady growth of mobile utilization versus desktop utilization over the last few years. I would only surmise to guess, but
Yes and no. So what's interesting is that the work from home thing with COVID and everything actually drove the the desktop more than we would have thought. Um, and because we were trying to figure out, iPad and iPhone, and we had a new major release, so we could actually do more there. But there's people are still like, for our kind of stuff that we do, it's mostly still you're sitting at a desk or something, right? There is the companion aspect of it, which is on your phone, where you're out and about, but nobody is like doing, at least our customers, nobody's doing any heavy lifting
right.
somewhere other than either the hotel or the office or at home, right?
Yeah. On the desktop.
And when they're on the go, it's more reference, it's more quick thing, it's more a quick note, like the smaller things. Like people would like, they say they would like to do more, but then if you're like this all day, you get physical issues.
This is true. This is true. I feel the hanging head syndrome, and the tightness in the back and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so, uh,
We're not 20 years old anymore. We can't, we're not as elastic as some of these young kids that can do that. But, as you get into your 30s and 40s, um, which is mostly our customer base, right? Um, you need like proper ergonomics.
yeah. I do find myself now, maybe it's a factor of age, but I defer so many more things I'll do that when I'm back at my desktop, because there's also something about the experience of being on a large screen and the
Hmm.
visibility of things, and those are maybe underrated. People don't know that that's the thing they're missing. Like they just want to get the thing done.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
you don't know. You don't. You're 100% right. You're
yeah,
100% right. I have this massive screen here that obviously you can't see, but it's big, and I'm way more productive here than even if I have my laptop. If I'm traveling like I was last week, because I can have so many different things. I can quickly glance at stuff.
yeah.
It is very different. But I want to kind of double click on that one point. One thing you mentioned earlier, which is you said like, oh, I'll just do that when I'm on my desk or whatever. I won't do it now. And I think what's happening there for me at least is that I don't want to lose the mo so if I'm out and about and I'm, enjoying what I'm doing, I don't want to be on the phone and like miss the moment. I can do this later, right? And so I think that people are starting to, I don't know if this is just me or just my circle of friends, they're like, we can't be in the moment if you're always on your bloody phone
I'm telling
or
you,
your
man,
iPad.
this is a factor of age. I'm paying very close attention to how I am changing around these things, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to like keep it in the context of everybody else and the various age groups that I am in regular contact with, and
Right.
there are certain dynamics of the entire world, talking about being more in the moment, but there is certainly a hustle that still exists in the younger generations that is not what we're focused on right now anymore as
Right.
50 plus year olds. We're kind of just like, yeah, I paid my dues. I'm kind of focused on
Right.
doing more efficient work, I guess, as opposed to the grind. And so that certainly is a factor, no doubt. But man, I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
it's certainly different for everybody, and some people just love being busy and love the hustle. I kind of this
Yeah. I don't think it's about like the hustle or not hustle. I think it's about um I think it's about efficiency. So I'll use my son as an example, right? He has his own car detailing business and whatnot, and then he has to update his website and all this kind of stuff. And so he was trying to do it on his phone, and he was like, "I'll just do this on my computer." So he's 20, right? And so I think it's people are realizing like he does now that stuff only on his computer. He goes into his room, closes the door, says I'm working, and he goes to his desk and he does his whatever he needs to do, call his leads, whatever it is, and he does it from there. He doesn't do it from his phone unless somebody's calling him. That's it. And
yeah.
he's 20, so I think there's a bit of a change.
I'll tell you something I'm doing more of as I get older is making the effort to be in person with people
Hmm.
that maybe I haven't connected with. Which brings me to this point. I will be in Markham on Tuesday, August 6th to Wednesday, August 7th. And if there's a way that we
I'll
could
be in town.
we should get together.
I'll
Then
be in town.
we'll get together.
100%.
Maybe
I'd love to. I'd love.
we'll we'll go to that old bubble tea place that you once took me to that I know you like. I don't know
I have
what
a
it was
few other
called.
nice places to take you.
All right, twist my rubber arm. I just I went did a search. I'm almost scared to show this picture, but October 2010, you would do your partner things in Niagara Falls at that Brazilian restaurant. I remember very fondly.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
and
Uh-oh.
one such picture
Uh-oh.
is me hanging out with the Brazilian girls, but I only a flash. Don't screenshot that because I think it's probably in bad taste these days. But man, was it ever good times back then? Because
Yes.
like the internet world as we know it today was so much different, and getting together was so special, and that's becoming special again, which I think is so great. People definitely seem to be
Yeah, no, I think
placing
I,
on.
I think I think it's really interesting because the whole work from home, remote, um, uh, and on one side, some people are becoming more introverted, or I don't know if that's a word, where they stay in their comfort zone and they don't come out. But then these other people that are craving connection,
Yeah.
And so they like actually a lot of times now, when I have a meeting, I'm like, call me. The phone still is good, and I can go out for a walk rather than be in front of a screen, right? And so the same kind of thing I think is happening with people just would prefer to just get together. Like I this morning I had a meeting, and the that guy is like, no, we're not doing this on Zoom. Just come here. We'll shoot the shit, and am I allowed to say that? And just we had coffee and just chatted, and it was great. It was fantastic, right? Because I think people are just fed up of the isolation, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I see this. And, we travel a bunch in my team, specifically at SkillPad. We're on the road a lot. Um, and it's interesting sort of the dynamics of it because in the channel, as we call it, the group of people that are vendors or such that sell to the MSP market, or generally anybody in the resell kind of channel, as we call it, we see each other very, very regularly. Like there's some of these folks that I see more times, it feels like, in the last few months than I've seen my wife. But I think what's interesting is the ends of the events, people just kind of fizzle and disappear, and then at the next one you see each other again, and it's like, oh hey, it's so good to see you, because there's no like goodbye end line to these events. There's always a hello starting point, but
Mm,
never a goodbye. And people just kind of disappear onto their flights and whatnot. And
yeah,
I find
yeah,
that an interesting
yeah,
dynamic of getting together with people, where friendships are very interesting, because you kind of make this point of getting together, and it's a very distinct hello and goodbye, and not sure when I'm going to see you again, but see you later. Um,
yeah,
and because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
not expecting the recurring nature of it necessarily. I find that a little comparison interesting.
yeah,
All right, so a couple weeks or a week from Tuesday, maybe we'll make some magic happen in the Markham area. We'll see if we
yeah. That
can't
would be great.
coerce
That would be fantastic.
a few old Daylite partners to come join us for a coffee or something. That would be fun. Times to reminisce.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. So let me know. So, you have my details. Let me
I
know,
do,
and
I
I'll
do.
I'll make.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for your generous amount of time you spent with me chatting today.
Oh, you're
I
more
kind of
than
knew
welcome.
it. I kind of knew it'd be easy to chat with you because we always got along so famously, and you could always get into interesting conversations about some of the challenges and tribulations of whatever it is we were going
Yes.
through. So thanks
Yeah.
for sharing.
Yep.
Thanks for giving us your perspective on all these wonderful things. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for your weekly MSP Confidential. Until then, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you all very soon. And thanks again, AJ.
And thank you for having me on.